When most people hear the name Spetsnaz, their mind jumps to Hollywood images of tough Russian soldiers, brutal training camps, and cold Siberian winters. But the real danger behind Spetsnaz is not the image, it is the method. It is the way they rewire the human body into a biological weapon that breaks bones not through strength, but through angles, reflexes, and the exploitation of human anatomy itself. And the strange part is, almost none of it looks like fighting. It looks like effortless manipulation, sudden collisions, and snap decisions, executed at a speed that the average fighter cannot even process before the damage is done. For decades, these techniques were not designed for sport, tournaments, or flashy demonstrations. They were engineered for destabilizing enemies during covert operations, eliminating threats in narrow corridors, and shutting down targets before they even understood what happened. While modern combat sports operate within rules, safety pads, and referees, Systema, the art behind Spetsnaz bone breaking, operates on a completely opposite philosophy. It does not care about safety, it does not care about fairness, and it does not care about mutual respect. Its only metric is efficiency, how quickly a joint can be hyperextended, how fast a bone can be fractured, or how sharply a ligamental chain can be severed so the enemy's body stops functioning. That is what creates fear. Not the brutality, but the simplicity. Because Systema attacks structural points, collarbones, elbows, knees, wrists, ribs, places humans cannot train to be stronger. You can build muscle, you can build stamina, you can build willpower, but you cannot build a second elbow. You cannot reinforce your floating ribs. You cannot grow armor around the brachial plexus. Once pressure hits those points at the right vector, the body will break, regardless of toughness, motivation, or gym strength. And here is the real mind twist. Spetsnaz soldiers were trained not to view bone breaking as violence, but as problem solving. If a door is locked, you break the lock. If a joint resists motion, you break the bone. When you remove the emotional hesitation from violence, combat becomes mechanical. And mechanical violence is always faster than emotional violence, because machinery has no doubt, no guilt, and no pause. Today you will discover 7 of the forbidden bone-breaking secrets that most combat sports refuse to acknowledge and most self-defense instructors avoid teaching. Not because they are mythical, but because they are too efficient, too injury-prone, and too operational for civilian use. This is the world where one mistake costs mobility, where one grip costs a limb, and where one collision costs a life. If you think fighting is about trading punches, this video will dismantle that illusion. If you think strength protects you, you are about to learn how easily the human body folds under the right torque. And if you think fairness exists in real violence, prepare to have that belief shattered, joint by joint. 1. Collarbone snap lock, clavicular fracture control. The collarbone is the weakest structural beam in the upper body, with one hand controlling the wrist and the other applying a downward crush on the clavicle. The bone cracks instantly, disabling the entire arm. Once the collarbone fractures, the victim loses the ability to raise or defend with that side. Sports fighters train punches. Spetsnaz trains structural collapse. 2. Rib compression crush, floating rib displacement. Spetsnaz uses sudden inward pressure applied at angles the rib cage cannot flex into. The floating ribs are prime targets because they have no anterior attachment and collapse under sharp compression. Breathing disruption, panic, and immobilization follow immediately. When breathing stops, fighting stops. 3. Elbow hyperpronation shear, olecranon lever break. The elbow joint only tolerates flexion and extension. By catching the wrist and twisting it inward while pushing the elbow backward, they generate torque that ruptures ligaments and dislocates the olecranon. Once the elbow loses structural integrity, the arm becomes dead weight. 4. Ankle rotation collapse, talus dislocation drop. The talus dislocates with surprisingly little rotational force when body weight shifts abruptly. By stepping behind the opponent's leg and rotating their torso while pulling the foot outward, the joint separates and ligaments snap. A man who cannot stand cannot fight, pursue, or flee. 5. Wrist spiral break, distal radio-ulnar disruption. When Spetsnaz applies a spiral twist through the palm while anchoring the elbow, the distal radio-ulnar joint collapses. Once rotated past its anatomical limit, the wrist loses alignment, and the forearm muscles cannot generate power. Weapons drop, fingers lose coordination, and grip strength evaporates. 6. Knee shear break, lateral ligament severance. The knee is designed for forward, backward motion, not sideways load. Lateral force at the side of the joint while anchoring the foot tears the MCL or ACL. No conditioning can override biomechanical failure. Once the knee collapses, the body follows. 7. Shoulder displacement drop, acromioclavicular tear. Systema isolates the shoulder by trapping the wrist and forcing the arm overhead while rotating the torso downward. This tears the acromioclavicular ligaments and dislocates the humeral head, eliminating all arm function. Sensory shock and panic make resistance impossible. Combat sports teach you how to fight inside a controlled box. Spetsnaz never lived inside that box to begin with. They studied joints, leverage, anatomy, and panic responses the way engineers study machines. When you see how easily the human frame can be folded, snapped, or displaced, you start understanding why real violence doesn't look like movies or tournaments. It looks like sudden, structural failure. Now here is where it becomes interesting for you. Most people watching this will close the video and forget what they just learned. They will scroll, swipe, and move on. But a few will think about how fragile the human body actually is, how little training the average person has, and how fast a fight can be decided without a single punch being exchanged. If you're one of those few, then drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me which of the 7 bone-breaking secrets shocked you the most. Tell me which one you think civilians should never learn. And tell me whether you believe modern fighters could even handle these techniques without rules to protect them. And here's the challenge. We are pushing to hit our first 10,000 subscribers purely through people who think differently about combat, not the casual crowd. If you want to be part of that group, then subscribe now. The moment we cross 10,000, we'll unlock the next series that exposes the forbidden methods no self-defense instructor dares to touch. Consider this the filter. If you think you're part of the small percent who actually understands what real violence looks like, prove it. Comment, subscribe, and let's see how fast we can reach 10,000.